My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and winter has always felt more familiar to me than people. Snow simplifies things. It softens sound, slows movement, and gives the world a kind of emotional distance that I've always found comforting. While others talk about how isolating winter feels, I've always experienced the opposite. When everything quiets down, my thoughts finally feel manageable. That's why, after a year that left me mentally exhausted in ways I couldn't properly explain, I decided to spend a week alone in a cabin in northern Ontario. I wasn't escaping grief or heartbreak. There was no dramatic reason behind it. I was just tired, burned out by constant noise, expectations, and the pressure of always being reachable. I wanted silence that didn't feel artificial. I wanted to disappear without actually going anywhere dangerous. The cabin listing felt reassuring, remote but accessible, fully winterized, maintained year-round, safe for solo travelers. That last part mattered more than I admitted to myself at the time. I read the description several times before booking, studying the photos like they could reveal something the words didn't. The drive took nearly 8 hours. The last portion of the trip felt different from the rest. The road narrowed, snowbanks rose higher, and the forest closed in on both sides. My phone lost signal about 40 minutes before I reached the cabin. I expected that, but the sudden silence that followed felt heavier than I anticipated. No music, no notifications, no map voice reminding me where I was going, just the steady crunch of tires and the faint hum of the engine. When I finally pulled into the clearing, the cabin looked exactly like the photos. Small, modest, dark wood exterior dusted with snow. A single porch light glowed warmly against the gray sky. There were no other buildings, no distant lights, no visible neighbors. The only tire tracks were my own. The forest stood close, dense, and still, like it was pressing inward. Inside, everything felt normal. Clean. Almost too orderly. The heater kicked on immediately, the lights worked without flickering, and a landline phone hung on the kitchen wall. A handwritten note was taped beside it. Cell service is unreliable. Use this for emergencies only. I remember smiling at that, thinking it sounded overly cautious. I unpacked slowly, made soup, and sat by the window watching snow fall until darkness erased the view outside. The quiet was deep and uninterrupted, broken only by the occasional creak of the cabin settling in the cold. It felt exactly like what I'd come for. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. The next day passed quietly. I read, wrote in my notebook, took photos of the trees heavy with snow. In the afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the clearing. The cold burned my lungs, but I liked that sensation. It made me feel present, anchored to my body instead of trapped in my head. The cabin sat alone in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by thick forest in every direction. There were no visible trails leading away from it, just untouched snow stretching into the trees. It was late afternoon when I noticed the footprints. They were near the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 yards from the cabin. Adult boot prints, clearly defined and evenly spaced. They didn't lead toward the cabin or away from it. They ran parallel to the tree line, as if someone had walked slowly along the edge of the clearing and paused there. I stood staring at them longer than I should have, trying to decide how fresh they were. Snow had fallen overnight, but not enough to erase detail. The edges were still sharp. I told myself it was probably a hiker or the owner checking something on the property. The forest wasn't private land, after all. Still, when I went back inside, I locked the door. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, the kind of noise your mind invents when you're not fully awake. But then I heard it again. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. The sound of snow compressing under weight. The footsteps moved along the outside wall of the bedroom, close enough that I could tell whoever it was wasn't rushing. They stopped just past the window. I lay completely still, listening, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard. I waited for a knock, a voice, some explanation that would make the situation make sense. Nothing happened. After a while, the footsteps moved away. I didn't look out the window. I didn't turn on the light. I stayed frozen until exhaustion pulled me back into shallow sleep. The next morning, I checked outside. There were no footprints near the cabin. None. Not smudged, not half covered. Just smooth, untouched snow. I told myself snowfall must have erased them, but the explanation didn't sit right. The rest of the day felt wrong in a way I couldn't put into words. The silence felt heavier. Every creak of the cabin made my body tense. I reminded myself that isolation can mess with perception. I'd wanted to be alone. This was the result. Snow started falling again that afternoon, thicker this time. By evening, visibility dropped until the trees blurred together. The road was barely recognizable. I picked up the landline and tried calling the owner, mostly to reassure myself that someone else existed beyond the forest. The call rang until it disconnected. That night, sleep came in fragments. In the morning, I opened the front door and stopped. The path I had shoveled to the porch the night before was gone. Not drifted over, not uneven, completely filled in, flat, smooth, like someone had taken care to erase it. I stood there for a long time, cold air biting into my face, trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. I told myself the wind must have shifted the snow just right. I didn't believe it. That evening, there was a knock on the door. Just one. Firm, controlled, not aggressive. I stood in the kitchen staring at the door, my body buzzing with tension. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't move. After a moment, I heard footsteps retreating into the snow. When I finally looked outside, there was nothing. That night, I dragged a chair in front of the door. The storm worsened overnight. Wind rattled the windows. Snow pressed against the cabin like it was trying to seal me in. In the morning, the world outside was nearly white. I tried starting my car, more for reassurance than necessity. It didn't start. When I stepped out to check the engine, I saw footprints beside the driver's door. Fresh ones. They weren't mine. I went back inside immediately, locked every door and window, and sat on the couch with my coat still on. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closer. Every sound felt intentional. Every silence felt worse. I hadn't seen anyone, but I was certain I wasn't alone. I spent the rest of that morning sitting fully dressed on the couch, my coat zipped up, boots still on. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't play music. I just listened. The cabin made sounds constantly, wood contracting in the cold, wind slipping through small gaps, the heater cycling on and off, but now every noise felt deliberate, like a signal I didn't understand yet. I kept replaying what I knew. I hadn't seen anyone's face. I hadn't heard a voice. I had only evidence, footprints, sounds, the feeling of being observed. Each thing on its own could be explained away. Together, they felt intentional. I tried calling the owner again. No answer. I considered dialing emergency services, but stopped myself. What would I say? Someone might be nearby? I heard footsteps. The road was snowed in, yes, but that wasn't unusual. I worried I sound hysterical. I worried I already was. Around midday, the snow slowed. The wind softened. A pale gray light filtered through the windows. I forced myself to move. I needed to do something, anything, that felt practical. I checked every window carefully. No signs of tampering. No handprints. No damage. The doors were solid. The locks intact. Still, the footprints by the car wouldn't leave my mind. I put on gloves and stepped outside again, moving slowly, deliberately, scanning the snow before each step. The prints were still there, sharp and clear. Large boots, heavy tread. Whoever had stood there had been close enough to look inside the car. Maybe inside the cabin too. I followed the tracks. They led away from the car and toward the tree line. My heart pounded as I walked, but curiosity pushed me forward. The tracks entered the forest without hesitation, weaving between trees with the confidence of someone who knew the terrain. After about 50 yards, they stopped. No return prints. No sign of where the person had gone next. Just an abrupt end, as if they had stood there for a moment and then vanished. I felt stupid for standing there as long as I did. Exposed, watched. I turned back quickly, my breath coming fast, convinced that if I looked over my shoulder, I'd see someone behind me. I didn't. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. The cabin felt different now, less like shelter, more like a fragile barrier. I kept the curtains partially drawn, leaving only small gaps to let light in. I ate without appetite, drank too much coffee. Every so often, I found myself holding my breath, listening. As night approached, anxiety settled deep in my chest. Darkness felt like a risk. I considered leaving on foot, but the thought of navigating the forest in winter terrified me more than staying. I didn't know how far the nearest road or building was. One wrong step, one injury, and I'd be far worse off. That night, the knocking returned. This time, it wasn't just one knock, it was three. Slow, evenly spaced. I stood in the hallway, frozen, staring at the door. The sound felt controlled, patient. Whoever was on the other side wasn't panicked. They weren't lost. They knew exactly where they were. I didn't answer. After a moment, I heard movement. Not footsteps retreating, footsteps circling, slow steps along the side of the cabin, then toward the back. I moved quietly to the bedroom and locked the door. Crouching beside the bed with my phone clutched uselessly in my hand. The footsteps stopped. Minutes passed, then longer. I didn't know how much time went by before exhaustion pulled me into a shallow, restless sleep. I woke to silence. Morning light filtered weakly through the window. I stayed still for a long time, listening. Nothing. When I finally emerged, the cabin looked unchanged. The door was still locked. No damage. No new tracks near the porch. The storm had fully cleared by midday. The sky was pale and empty. I tried starting the car again. This time, it worked. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. I didn't hesitate. I packed as fast as I could, throwing things into my bag without caring how they fit. I took one last look around the cabin, trying to burn every detail into my memory. As I drove away, I kept checking the rearview mirror. I didn't see anyone. The road was slow going, but passable. About 20 minutes out, I passed a snowplow heading in the opposite direction. I flagged the driver down, my hands shaking as I stepped out. I asked if anyone lived nearby. The driver hesitated, then said, "People don't usually stay around here in winter." I asked what he meant. He told me the cabin used to belong to a caretaker years ago, someone hired to watch over several nearby properties during the off-season. The man stayed year-round, even in winter. Eventually, people stopped hearing from him. They never found a body. They assumed he'd left. I drove the rest of the way in silence. At home, days passed before I could sleep normally. Curiosity gnawed at me. Eventually, I searched for the cabin listing. It was gone. I dug deeper. Old forum posts, archive discussions. I found one thread where someone mentioned strange activity around the property, footprints, lights, knocking. Most replies dismissed it as wildlife or paranoia. One comment stood out. Someone claimed the caretaker never left, that he'd been seen years later, wandering the area, living off abandoned structures, avoiding people. A man who didn't want to be found. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is this: nothing supernatural happened to me. No monsters, no ghosts, just a person or people living where they shouldn't have been. That scares me more. I still love winter. I still love snow, but I no longer believe solitude is harmless. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 36 years old, and until last winter, I believed most fear comes from imagination. I used to think that when people talked about feeling watched or unsafe, it was usually stress filling in gaps where logic should be. I trusted explanations, weather, fatigue, coincidence. That belief didn't survive the drive north. I work as a regional maintenance inspector, which means long hours on the road, often in bad conditions. In late February, I was assigned a final inspection on a decommissioned relay station in rural Manitoba. The site was scheduled for demolition in spring, but company policy required one last winter check. It wasn't urgent, just inconvenient. The weather forecast was bad, but not alarming. Light snow, dropping temperatures, possible road closures later in the evening. I was told to go early, finish quickly, and head back before dark. I didn't. The highway thinned the farther north I went. Towns disappeared. Gas stations became rare. Eventually, the road narrowed into a long, empty stretch, bordered by frozen fields and scattered tree lines. Snow moved across the asphalt in thin, restless sheets. My radio faded into static, then silence. About an hour from the station, I passed a digital road sign flashing amber. Winter Road closed ahead, local access only. I slowed down, uncertain. I hadn't been told about a closure. There were no barriers, no cones, no physical block, just the sign. I checked my map. The relay station was beyond that point. I told myself local access applied to workers like me. That was the first bad decision. The road beyond the sign felt different, not physically, but emotionally. The landscape flattened into something repetitive and disorienting. White fields, gray sky, no landmarks. The snow fell steadily, not heavily enough to reduce visibility, but enough to blur edges and depth. That's when I noticed the vehicle behind me. At first, it was just headlights, far back. I didn't think much of it. There weren't many roads out there. Anyone driving north would likely be headed the same way. 10 minutes passed. The headlights stayed the same distance behind me. I sped up slightly. They sped up too. I slowed. They slowed. I changed lanes briefly, just to see. They followed. A tight feeling settled in my chest, but I pushed it aside. Paranoia. Coincidence. The road was straight. There weren't many options. Eventually, the relay station came into view. A squat concrete structure surrounded by fencing, half buried in snow. I turned off the road and pulled into the access area. The headlights behind me slowed, then stopped on the road. They didn't turn in. They just waited. I sat there with the engine running, watching them in my side mirror. After a full minute, they drove past, never speeding up, never slowing down. I couldn't see the driver's face. I told myself I was being ridiculous. The inspection didn't take long. Everything was as expected, cold, quiet, untouched. The wind cut sharply across the open area, and I found myself rushing through the checklist just to get back into the car. When I finished, I looked toward the road. The tire tracks I'd left were already being softened by falling snow. No other fresh tracks. The drive back felt heavier. The sky darkened faster than it should have. Snow thickened, and wind picked up enough to push the car slightly on open stretches. About 20 minutes in, I saw the sign again. Winter Road closed. This time, there were barriers. Orange and white, set diagonally across the road. A maintenance truck sat off to the side, engine off, empty. I pulled over and got out, wind biting through my jacket. The barriers looked freshly placed. The snow around them was barely disturbed. I stood there, confused, until headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The same vehicle. It slowed as it approached. Didn't stop, didn't turn around, just passed me, crossed the closed section, and continued south. I stared after it, heart pounding. I had no signal, no instructions, just a closed road and worsening weather. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then, 15. No one came. Finally, against my better judgment, I moved the barrier just enough to get through. I told myself I'd explain later. Safety mattered more than rules. The moment I crossed back onto the road, something shifted. The wind felt louder, the road felt narrower, and within minutes, headlights appeared behind me again. Closer this time. They stayed close all the way until the turnoff for a small service road I hadn't noticed before. When I slowed, unsure whether to take it, the headlights slowed too. I turned, so did they. That was when fear stopped being abstract. I didn't know why I took the service road. Later, when I tried to explain it to myself, I told myself it was instinct or caution or some deep survival reflex kicking in. The truth is simpler and more embarrassing. I panicked. The idea of staying on that open stretch of road with someone deliberately following me felt worse than turning onto an unfamiliar one. The service road was narrower, barely plowed, with snow pushed into uneven ridges along both sides. Trees pressed close, their branches heavy and motionless. My headlights tunneled forward, illuminating only a few meters at a time. I checked the mirror constantly. The car followed, not aggressively, not tailgating, just there, always there. I drove for several minutes without seeing any turnoffs or buildings. No signs, no lights. The snow thickened and the road surface grew rougher. I slowed down, afraid of skidding. The car behind me slowed as well, maintaining the same distance, that was when I tried something stupid. I pulled over abruptly, as far to the side as the snow would allow, and put the car in park. My heart was racing, but part of me needed confirmation. I needed to know whether this was coincidence or intent. The headlights behind me stopped. The engine stayed running, the lights stayed on. Neither of us moved. The silence was unbearable. No wind, no animals, just two vehicles idling in the middle of nowhere. I waited for the driver to get out, to wave, to say anything that would make this make sense. Nothing happened. After nearly a minute, I put my car back in gear and pulled forward again. They followed. That was the moment my rational explanations collapsed. No one does that by accident. No one mirrors your movements on an unmarked road in the middle of winter unless they mean to. The service road eventually opened into a small clearing. A single structure stood there, a low rectangular building partially buried in snow. It looked abandoned, no lights, no tracks leading to or from it. I slowed without meaning to. The car behind me slowed too. As I passed the building, I glanced at it through the side window. The door was slightly ajar. Snow had drifted inside, forming a thin white line across the concrete floor. I don't know why, but something about that open door made my skin crawl. I kept driving. The road curved sharply and then ended. Just ended. No turnaround, no signage, just a wall of snow and trees. I stopped. The car behind me stopped as well. Closer now. Too close. I considered getting out, shouting, demanding to know what they wanted. The thought vanished as soon as it formed. I was alone, outnumbered by uncertainty. Any confrontation out here would be on their terms, not mine. I turned the wheel hard and reversed, tires struggling for traction. It took several attempts, but I managed to turn around. As I did, my headlights briefly swept across the other vehicle. It was an older model SUV, dark color, no visible company markings. The windshield was tinted enough that I couldn't see the driver. As soon as I straightened out, I accelerated. They followed. The drive back down the service road felt longer than the way in. Every second stretched. Every shadow looked like movement. I watched the fuel gauge drop and felt a new wave of panic rise. If my car died out here, I had no idea what would happen next. When I finally reached the main road, relief hit me so hard my hands started shaking. I turned south. The other vehicle stayed behind me. For a while, I focused only on driving, staying steady, not making sudden moves. Eventually, the snow lightened, the wind died down, the road widened. I began to recognize landmarks from earlier. Then, without warning, the headlights behind me slowed. The car pulled over. I kept driving. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back again. I drove until my shoulders ached from tension and my jaw hurt from clenching my teeth. Only when I reached a small town with actual streetlights did I finally pull into a gas station and stop. I sat there for a long time before getting out. Inside, I asked the clerk if the winter road closures had gone into effect earlier than planned. He frowned and told me the road had been closed since morning. No local access, no exceptions. I asked about the service road. He looked confused and said it hadn't been used in years. That night, in my hotel room, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for the relay station, the service road, the building in the clearing. It didn't take long to find old articles and forum posts. The service road once led to temporary housing for seasonal workers. It was shut down after repeated complaints about theft, vandalism, and harassment. People reported being followed, watched, intimidated into leaving. No arrests were ever made. The area was eventually abandoned entirely. I finished the job reports the next morning and declined further assignments in that region. My supervisor didn't push. When I asked if anyone else had mentioned strange encounters out there, he hesitated before saying, "Some places just don't empty out cleanly. I still drive for work. I still trust logic, but I no longer assume that isolation means emptiness. Sometimes it just means there's no one around to stop someone from doing exactly what they want."